While there is a lot to like about modern football boots, there are a few annoying things that I think are holding the market back. So in this video, I'm going to be covering 5 trends that I'm not a huge fan of that I'm hoping will change as we go into the next year. And after watching the video, if there's any trends in football boots that you're also not a big fan of, please leave them in the comments below. Starting off with the first trend, let's talk about Cyclone studs. First off, what are these Cyclone stud configurations and why is Nike and some other brands starting to incorporate them into their sole plates? Well, we actually first saw this introduction of the Cyclone sole plate in the Phantom Luna that came out a couple years ago. Now, if you go on Nike's website, they claim that the use of this Cyclone configuration is to help you plan and pivot your feet with speed when you're playing a match. And with that marketing angle, Nike also made some vague claims regarding injury prevention on the Lunas, stating that the Cyclone stud pattern could potentially help reduce the ACL tears that we see in women's football very often. The only thing is, Nike never really presented much evidence to support that claim, and when you look at the studs themselves, it doesn't really seem to make sense. Now, the bladed studs in this Cyclone pattern are very sharp, and they're going to give you a ton of traction on an FG pitch. But the truth is, a ton of traction really just stops you from slipping and will help you make slightly sharper turns, but it does not necessarily improve safety. And that's why traction is always a trade-off when it comes to football boots, because the more traction you have, the less likely you will be to slip, but at the same time, the more force it's going to put on your ankle, knees, hips, and all your joints throughout your body. And what I find to be one of the funniest claims about this Cyclone stud pattern is that Nike puts such a great emphasis on these helping your performance, but when you watch professional players play in the Phantoms, they're almost never wearing the FG version that comes with this Cyclone stud pattern. Instead, they're going to be using the soft ground version more often than not that has a more simple configuration, just with longer, rounded metal studs. And then for players who more often find themselves on artificial grass, this FG pattern with the Cyclone studs is even more of an inconvenience. They really just offer way too much traction at the front of the foot, and they could be at risk of getting stuck in that synthetic surface. And for that reason, the artificial grass version of the Phantoms, in my opinion, is going to be a better option for most players. And honestly, I feel that the inclusion of the Cyclone stud pattern is really just Nike changing things for the sake of changing things, and it does more for the aesthetics of the boots than anything else. I think they could have been better off staying with just simple chevron or tri-star shaped studs for the FG version. Next up, let's move on to our second annoying trend, which is AG boot availability. In the year 2025, why is it still a challenge to get artificial grass versions of the most popular football boots? Well, the truth is, a couple decades ago, firm ground natural grass pitches were actually much more common across the world, and in some places you can still find a good natural grass pitch. However, in some places like the United States, artificial grass pitches have become a lot more popular because they're cheaper to install and maintain than a natural grass field, and also they're getting a little bit better at replicating the sensation of natural grass. And so for those reasons, more and more footballers are finding themselves playing on artificial grass. But despite this, it seems that the football boot market is slightly lagging behind. Now, to be fair, if you shop online, it's actually relatively easy to find artificial grass versions of both Nike and Adidas football boots. But for other brands, AG versions are still really limited, and if you're shopping in person at the store, it can be nearly impossible to find a pair to try on. And playing with FG boots on artificial grass can be a real safety hazard, so hopefully more brands will take note of this and create more AG options in the coming years. Next up, let's talk about our third annoying trend, and that's the lack of wide variations. There may be nothing more annoying than ordering a new pair of football boots, trying them on for the first time, and then finding out they're just too narrow. And what makes things even worse is that of all the brands on the market, the only two that I could find that offer wide variations were Asics and New Balance. Now, there have been some major changes in footwear throughout the past 5 years, and it's never been easier to find wide shoes for running, gym work, and CrossFit. And in terms of offering wide variations, this is an area where a lot of football brands are starting to lag behind. Now, obviously, football boots are are going to have some specific performance constraints, you can't have too much extra space in the boots because your feet will be sliding around. So while brands do need to minimize the extra space throughout the length of the boots, there's no reason why any pair of boots should be crushing your feet when you try them on. And of course, everybody's feet are going to be a little bit different from one another, and some players just need a little bit more room in the toe box than what current boots are offering. And I actually think that Nike and Adidas would have a ton of success if they started experimenting with offering wide versions of their most popular models. Because the truth is, a lot of these modern boots are great, but tons of players don't get to enjoy them because they just don't fit them. But if you are looking for decent recommendations for wide-footed players, check the description below. I'll try and leave some of the best options that are currently available on the market. For the fourth trend, let's talk about disappearing leather football boots. Are leather football boots actually starting to disappear? Well, not completely. Some brands like Mizuno and Adidas have a very comprehensive line of leather boots, and that doesn't seem like it's going to change anytime soon. However, over the past few years, we've seen some iconic leather football boots pretty much disappear. Several years ago, Puma actually decided that they would stop making leather football boots permanently, and the King line has not been the same since. And then shortly after that, Nike announced that one of their most popular models, the Tiempo, would be transitioning to a synthetic material as well. And in all honesty, I think the new synthetic Legend 10 is a good football boot, but a lot of players do miss that natural leather feel. And there are some actual reasons to avoid the use of leather when making football boots, and I do sympathize with the ethical side of those concerns. And while brands do use ethical concerns as a reason to stop using leather in their boots, I personally think that's just a distraction from the real reason, which is to cut costs. Because more often than not, using a synthetic upper is going to be more affordable for manufacturers compared to a more premium leather upper. Now, there is absolutely nothing wrong with synthetic football boots, and some of the best boots on the entire market are made using synthetic materials. But I think most brands would ultimately benefit from having both natural leather and synthetic offerings in their product line. All that being said, hope isn't lost because there have been some rumors that Nike could be considering bringing back a leather version of the Tiempo for next year. And for the fifth annoying trend, let's talk about the excessive use of grip on football boots. Football boots are getting stickier and stickier, and it seems like there's nothing that we can do to stop it. The Nike Phantom, the Vapor 16, the Puma Ultra 5, and even the New Balance Tequila all have sticky uppers. Now, having grippy elements on the upper of a football boot isn't a new feature, and it goes back as far as the launch of the original Predator, which was 30 years ago. But I think what really accelerated this trend was the launch of the Nike Phantom GX that came out a little over 2 years ago. And with the launch of the GX, Nike introduced their grip knit material, which is just incredibly sticky, and since then they've added it not just to the Phantom but also to their Vapor line. So that means 2 of Nike's 3 flagship boots are gonna have that grippy material, and even if you want to go with the third option, which is the Tiempo, you're still gonna have a decent amount of grip throughout that fly touch upper. And the truth is, having these grippy uppers isn't inherently bad, and some players actually prefer them. And there is definitely an argument that for curve shots, crosses, and free kicks, you may get a slight advantage when trying to impart a spin on the ball when you have a pretty sticky material on the upper. But personally, I think it's a shame that really matte and slick football boot uppers are starting to be harder and harder to come by. And I also feel that dribbling with boots that have a really slick upper just feels a little bit more clean and precise as compared to a boot that's really sticky, where especially when they're straight out of the box, the ball can tend to get stuck under your feet. But one thing to be sure of is that football boot trends are constantly changing, and in a couple years time, we'll probably see a whole new suite of uppers that have a completely different feel and material type. But let me know in the comments below if you prefer a more slick upper or if you want something a little more sticky. And guys, that is going to do it for this video. If you've enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Also, if you want to pick up a new pair of football boots, you can find links to them on sale with discount codes in the description below. Thank you guys so much again for watching, and I will see you in the next video.